Everyone, before we get into the patch rundowns, I want to talk about a brief thing, which is a lot of you guys might know that I am a co-owner of Mobalytics, which is one of the apps that you can use while playing League of Legends that gives you insight into who your teammates are, what's going on inside of Champ Select, what runes or builds or items or whatnot you want to be doing and whatnot. You guys know that I am a very big supporter of getting intel on who your teammates are before the game, and so being able to see what your teammates are picking, what type of champions they have a tendency of picking, and seeing basically where the game's going to head before going into the game itself is something that you can be utilizing the app for. Anyways, in the future, what I am in the process of doing along with the Mobalytics team is trying to add in more features that I feel like other apps just haven't had, features that I've talked about, you've probably heard me talk about on stream and videos over the years as just being missing from apps and other things that I think could be really cool to add. So you can definitely expect stuff like that inside of the future, but yeah. Hey everyone, it's LS, and this is going to be the patch 12.2 notes rundown. This patch should not be one that is actually influenced by pro play, as Riot operates on a 2-patch cycle, so I'm not having the highest expectations for it. If you guys have been browsing social media in the last couple of days, you might have actually seen that some pro players have actually begun to speak out about the lack of changes in the patches. This has been something that I've been complaining about for a few patches now in a row. I've also mentioned how it made the preseason really stale. Preseason meta, even early season meta in terms of champion viability and other things hasn't really been changing all that much. So let's see if 12.2 is actually going to do anything that different. So patch highlights. Zeri is in the patch, probably going to end up being released a little bit later on. I already gave my initial thoughts on Zeri. I didn't realize that her abilities actually came out later, so I didn't actually do a video on that. What I was glad to see is that she actually did go with the model that I was hoping that a champion would eventually go with, which is building the AP items, but actually operating as a standard champion. So I think that that's really cool. I'm not totally sure exactly how she's going to function. By the looks of it, it seems very akin to almost Kaiser in a way, where I think that her numbers are just always going to gate whether or not she's actually viable, as inherently her kit by itself doesn't have enough value as a standalone. And what I mean by that generally is that there's not enough utility inside of it. But, okay, Janna. Base stats and abilities are adjusted. Despite being one of League's signature champion supports, Janna doesn't feel very rewarding to play right now, especially when compared to other Enchanter options in bot lane. I actually disagree with the sentiment. I think that Janna is really, really, really good, but the problem is that you have to be really proficient at Janna to play her. If you are just playing her to, spam one ability on an opponent and shield your allies, then yes, it's not going to feel very rewarding. But I think there's a lot of upside to Janna if you actually do play her at a higher ceiling, but most people don't attempt to play her at a higher ceiling. It's like saying that Soraka is only actually a heal bot, when in plenty of lanes she's actually able to be a bully, and you can do a lot of different things with her, but generally most people will just stand behind their carries and only use heal and stuff like that, in which case you'll arrive at such sentiments. But anyways, Janna's been totally changed around. Move speed 315 to 330. Base AD is now up. It actually, her base AD actually goes really high, now going to 103 in the later stages of the game. AD growth 1.5 to 3. Base attack range 550 to 500. So that is going to be lowered. Tailwind. Janna gains 8% bonus movement speed only while moving towards allied champions. Okay. Fast and Furious is removed. Janna's basic attacks and Zephyr no longer deal bonus magic damage based on her bonus move speed. Okay. Howling Gale. So the mana cost for this is dramatically down. Minimum range for it is up by 100. Maximum range only goes up by 10. Doesn't really do anything. Time to destination 1.5 to 1.25 seconds means that obviously this is going to be moving slightly faster. And now given that the mana cost is also dramatically down and the range goes up a little bit more, I guess that it's more spammable. W Zephyr, range 550 from edge to 650 centered is a nice. Slow duration 2 to 3 seconds. Cooldown 8 to 6 to 12 seconds at all ranks. A base damage 55 to 175 to 70 to 190. So you're losing a lot of damage on W because obviously you'd be able to cast the old W twice and the time that you can now just cast one W, and so you have to look at the damage that way. So the damage on W is actually dramatically down, unless you're doing it up front and you're bursting, but obviously her numbers are not aligned to be bursting. Bonus move speed, 6 to 10% to 8 to 12%, and then Eye of the Storm is now updated. Friendly forecast, whenever Janna's attacks or abilities knock up at least one enemy champion, slower knock up at least one enemy champion, Eye of the Storm's cooldown is reduced by 20%, and she receives plus 20% heal and shield power for 5 seconds. Shield, 80 to 220 plus 70% AP to 80 to 200 plus 65% AP, and cooldown 16 to 12 to 15 to 9, but this is a lot more spammable now. So shield decay is 0.75 seconds to 1.25, and now the shield is also lasting longer. So what this makes me think is that Janna, she might actually just be picked in the spots where, yes, you're trying to have her answer engage. You're trying to have her be a disruptor for hard engage. You're trying to have her be able to juggle multiple sources of aggro. And now it's looking like she's going to be able to do that more than like Lulu could do, and that her E is going to be able to be cast maybe multiple times during a fight. And then the 20% heal and shield power means that she probably gets more benefit now out of going Moonstone Renewer, and now she just has a lot of steroids along with Revitalize, maybe even Guardian, although she probably takes Ares still in a lot of lanes or something of that nature. But the E being so low cooldown is definitely really scary. The increase, the 20% increase on heal and shield power, this is really good, especially because enchanter items are so cheap, and a lot of them do give the ability haste. Moonstone is really good. Monsoon, healing tick rate 0.5 seconds to 0.25 seconds. Total heal amount unchanged. So it seems like Janna has been shifted from being a big bully for people that were proficient at her into actually more of her identity of a disruptor enchanter against hard engage. So they've really tunneled her into that playstyle, and they're aiming to have her basically be able to answer hard engage and things of that nature better than the Lulu, I guess. And so Lulu is going to be more of the mid-range type thing, whereas Janna now is going to be on the entire side of defensive. And I really like this because I do think there already were a lot of Janna spots, but the problem is that a lot of pro players don't put time into Janna to bring her to a ceiling to where she's more worth being picked than other champions that are being played. So I think that's fine. All right, so now we move on. And speaking of the devil, Lulu, W cooldown increased. Lulu's been the queen of bot lane for quite some time now, especially at the highest levels of play. So we're reducing access to her most versatile spell. All right, Whimsy, 16 to 12 to 17 to 13. Not absolutely game-breaking. It's very rare that you're casting Whimsy immediately off cooldown, and this is always the comment that I say to people when they look at changes like this, right? As you have to think about how practical the change actually is. Now, don't get me wrong. There are going to be fights where, yes, if Whimsy did come up 1 second sooner, then you might have been able to actually turn the tides. This is more so going to be the case maybe in mid-game or late-game, but really what this is hurting more so than support is actually Lulu's versatility as being able to go mid and top, because that is where actually Whimsy is generally going to be cast off cooldown, because it's not going to be as conditional as it is for a support Lulu, for the stars to align for you to get the most value out of casting it. So that is going to be interesting, but so Lulu's getting tagged, Janna's getting really recentered into her role. I think this is good so far. Nocturne, health growth increased, Q damage ratio increased. Nocturne has been a nightmare to play, as in all skill brackets, regardless of his builds or runes. We're revving up with some scaling power so he can become more useful as the game progresses, rather than just relying on his ultimate as his only way to say lights out. So health growth is kind of interesting. He ends up getting basically a ruby crystal of HP. Duskbringer, bonus AD ratio 75 to 85%. So I do imagine that this affects his wave clear in some regard. So Nocturne, there have been changes to the jungle, but this doesn't mean that mid or top Nocturne couldn't end up coming back or something. You could start doing some crazy stuff with that. But I don't think that these changes immediately pole vault him right back into the limelight. I think that if you're going to be picking Nocturne, you're generally going to be picking it in combo situations where you're trying to get more value out of just Nocturne, and Nocturne's acting as a key. Obviously, for Nocturne enthusiasts inside of solo queue, this is still a nice buff for sure. Qiyana, base health regen decrease, brush zone Q decreased. Okay, Qiyana is ruling all over elite play a little too harshly right now. Well, that's going to be the nature of Qiyana inside of a solo queue environment. Base stats 7.5 to 6 seconds on the base health regen. Q edge of Ixtal, grass trail zone duration 3.5 seconds to 3 seconds is definitely going to be a nerf, but this is on the lighter side, and I'm glad that they went with this lighter side of stuff. The base health regen does allow you to trade against her in lane more, and she's obviously going to be more fragile. Qiyana does have a really fast joust against a lot of champions, but a lot of the mages that are getting picked right now in mid lane generally have pretty good ability to tango with her. Obviously, Victor is going to be one of the more notable ones. Victor is pretty much a bully that loses to very, very few people inside of mid lane. He is all over pro play right now, and he's just all over solo queue. So definitely nice to see that they were very careful with the Qiyana nerfs. Rengar. Our passive now enables leaping from camouflage. Okay, as a primary jungler, this battle kitty's been suffering a lot on the Chemtech Rift. So what they did is they added a passive to his R, so he doesn't have this at level 1, so you can't, do this with, Senna Rengar at level 1 or something, but what has happened now is that while he's camouflaged, he can leap to enemies. So in Chemtech Rift, Rengar now gets a little bit scary while he is obviously inside of the terrain that allows him to be camouflaged. But what this opens up is that Rengar gains more power now with Senna, because Rengar can do some really cute stuff where he leaps from the brush onto something, and then Senna activates Mist, and then Rengar gains another leap because he's inside of the Mist. So Senna Rengar was one of the first things that some people thought of when they saw this change. It wasn't just the Chemtech stuff. While I do think that Senna Rengar has some viability maybe with Senna being in the team comp now, I don't think inherently that Senna Rengar is going to be a thing outright in bot lane, because it's going to be a lane that it would be very difficult to get through. Rengar's going to be down base levels if he's going to be with Senna and whatnot, and I don't think that the upside being able to brush leap to a minion, Senna activates Mist, brush leap to a champion, while that is really strong setup, it's only accessible already at level 6, which means that Rengar would already have ultimate. So in what worlds are we doing, combo sequences like this or something? But hey, for the YouTubers, definitely going to end up in Synapse or something. Samira, our base damage increased. Now that our mid-game transition is less reliable with the shield bow nerfs, we're giving Samira a bit more baseline potential in her R so she can snowball in style. So yeah, I don't think the shield bow nerfs do anything really to Samira's ability to transition into mid-game, at least not in pro play or anything. So this is just outright a buff. Physical damage per shot, 0 to 20 plus 50% AD to 5 to 25 plus 50% AD. Total damage per target, 0-100 plus 500% AD to 50 to 250 plus 500% AD. It's just a lot of extra damage added into her Inferno trigger, and so this is really nice to see, because I do think that Samira is a really hyper-conditional champion. It doesn't really have a whole lot of merit to be picked over a lot of other AD carries right now, so it's nice to just see buffs. Okay, now this has been a patch where a lot of combos are just, or like champions that are sort of from the same school of thought are just getting mentioned. Senna. Q passive now empowers basic attacks with slows. Senna is quite weak this season, especially when she builds for DPS. The old Glacial Augment was a crucial part of that playstyle, and since it no longer procs off Senna's basic attacks, we're adding some utility back into her kit. Absolution. Low visibility, innate. Senna's basic attacks now slow enemies by 20%, plus 6% per 100 ability power, plus 10% per 100 bonus AD for 2 seconds. This is huge. Holistically disagree with the idea that Senna is weak right now. I think that Senna is very good when you have Senna combos in bot lane, but that is going to be a thing for predominantly only pro play or, super elite, where the person is proficient at Senna and the other person playing with Senna is also proficient at doing combos. So I do agree that Senna isolated is not as strong as, she once was, but Senna as a combo I think is perfectly fine. Shen. Q damage decreased. With the changes to teleport in 12.1, Shen has once again become king when it comes to map influence from top lane. To bring things back to equilibrium, we're lowering its damage as a duelist instead of bringing down his cross-map power so that his unique global presence remains his most powerful tool. Q Twilight Assault, increased bonus damage, 10 to 40. plus 6 every 3 levels. Okay. To plus 5 to 7% plus 2% more. Okay. Targets max HP. To 10 to 40 plus 6 every 3 levels. To 4 to 6%. So they actually just removed 1% of the target's max health. This is definitely a big nerf to Shen. Shen does gain some benefit because he often was always TPing to the turret post Stand United, and so now that's just like a given, and so people can't really do the teleport to minion freeze on him or things of that nature if he uses his ultimate. I think this is actually a little bit excessive for a nerf. I think this is actually too much on the excessive side, to be completely honest, but okay, we move on. Updated, Tahm Kench. Q slow increased, E adjusted, damage shortage, gray health decreased unless near multiple enemies. R ally shield increased, now grants move speed upon devouring ally. We did a mini rework of Tahm Kench back in 11-13 because of his old kit. Okay. Rework is looking pretty good so far in terms of pro play, as he doesn't have nearly as much priority there as he used to. When it comes to his win rates, the rework didn't dramatically affect the difference between his support versus top capabilities, but it did highlight the gap. This left support Tahm Kench players feeling like the catfish was no longer viable in their role. Now we've had some time to observe all these effects together, willing to take a riskier swing to buff support Kench while nerfing his top lane capabilities. Okay, Tongue Lash. 50%, so it ends up removing, magical footwear or something from the opponent, essentially. Ethic Skin, amount of damage stored into gray health, 45 to 65% to 15 to 55%, and obviously you're never going to be maxing E first. Increase to 45 to 65% if there are 2 or more visible enemy champions nearby, so he gets back his old amount as long as he's playing support or he's in mid-game. Amount of healing restored from gray health, 30 to 100%, levels 1 to 18 to 45 to 100%, levels 1 to 18. So obviously he gets a lot more sustain as well down in bot lane. Ally shield upon devour, 400 600 plus 100% AP to 500 to 900 plus 150% AP. Move speed upon devouring an ally slows Tahm Kench by 30 to 10% while ally is swallowed, to grants Tahm Kench 40% movement speed for 3 seconds regardless of swallow duration. Okay, so basically, the main thing, the shield doesn't really matter. It's very, very, very unnatural for the shield that he grants the ally to actually wholly be chewed through. Usually, they either just wait, or it's essentially granting invulnerability, whether it was 400 or 500. That's the way that it should just be perceived. There is very, very little universes or games where the entirety of the shield will actually be chewed through before it would just dissipate outright. So what's happening now is they're trying to turn him into a QSS. The issue is that if they successfully make him unable to be moved in bot lane, and they actually do manage to make him, grant QSS on less than a 1 minute cooldown or something again, if he can get the cooldown or something to 30 or 40 seconds, yes, it's not the old Devour that it once was, but it'll probably end up returning him to where he's at. So I think in this regard, with where they're trying to go with him, I would say the rework is starting to turn into a failure from my POV. Okay, Talon. W monster damage ratio decreased. Drake. Damage against monsters 130 to 105. This is going to tag Talon. This is going to hit him really hard. I do think that Talon was one of the best junglers in the entire game, and I do not think that he was getting the attention that he actually deserved for how valuable of a champion he could be with certain combos and whatnot. So a little bit unfortunate there for Talon, but yes, this is going to knock him down a lot. Tristana, base health and health regen increased. Our Rocket Girl isn't doing so hot lately. Base health, 559 to 600, so she's actually getting about an auto attack worth of value in mid lane, or top lane, wherever you're going to end up playing her. Obviously, you could play her in bot lane. And then base health regen is also up by 0.25, so just a lot of extra sustain and trade power for mid and top Tristana is the way that I'm looking at this. I don't think this matters as much down in bottom lane, especially because the spots that you're picking Tristana in are not generally proactive spots, whereas in mid and top, they are proactive spots, and so these types of changes really do matter. Okay. Veigar, Q cooldown decreased. Stacks from large monsters and minions increased. The Tiny Master of Evil has been less threatening than usual as of late. We're upping the rate of his phenomenal evil stack so we can stand above his competitions in mid lane figuratively speaking at least. Baleful Strike, 7 to 5 seconds to 6 to 4 seconds. Stacks granted upon killing large monsters and minions, 2 to 3. So the thing is that sometimes you're not actually able to queue the cannon, so it doesn't really matter about the change to the minions. So what's going to end up happening here is you're going to have a couple of extra stacks. The real buff comes in that he has an entire second shaved off his Q. That is where it's going to come in. So this converts to damage output in mid and late game because he's getting extra Qs off that he otherwise wouldn't have been able to have. It's a very minor buff. It's a welcome one for sure, but it's not one that is instantly tipping Veigar into, you know, elite, super top tier level champion. Volibear, base AD growth increased, E cooldown decreased. So attack damage growth is actually up by 0.5, so Volibear basically gets a longsword now at max rank. And then Sky Splitter, 15 to 13 seconds is also a really nice change for the bear. So, I mean, his shield, his trading inside of lane is definitely going to be there. This isn't really speeding up his jungle. Well, I guess it does actually impact his jungle because he probably is casting E off cooldown in a lot of instances, but I don't think that it's going to make Volibear come back in pro play. Volibear, I don't think, has any business coming into pro play, and I don't think these buffs are big enough. Okay, Yasuo and Yone, they both received the same buff. They got 5% AD, and I believe this is because something is happening with lethal tempo or something. And, you know, they're saying, like Samira, the Wing Brothers were hit hard by the Immortal Shield Bow nerfs. Entirely disagree. Again, it's one of those things where generally the entirety of Shield Bow wasn't actually being chewed through. There are things. I would say that Yasuo probably has it chewed through more often than Yone. But again, I'm thinking mostly of pro play, where sometimes they're not even going shield bow. They're not always going shield bow. Sometimes they are going for the other crit items that aren't shield bow. So for variations of their builds, this is just going to be outright buffs for them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so Zed, our base damage ratio decreased. Zed has been creeping up from the shadows in both in terms of power and ban rate, tapping him back down in a way that will require him to make better use of his base kit to secure kills. Okay, damage on his death mark is going from 100% to 65%. That is a huge nerf. It's a huge nerf to his R, and I do totally agree that it does mean that he has to be fundamentally better as a player in order to still secure the kills. He's going to still be fine in spots where you're intentionally aiming to pick Zed to get a lot of value out of Zed's fundamental kit, where you're not just looking to overload on someone and kill them. But this is a nerf, and it should be, you know, seen as such. Lich Bane. At the start of the season 2021, we revamped Lich Bane to broaden its user base by removing its ability haste and increasing the Spellblade damage and cooldown. These changes made it very powerful as a burst tool, and the burst got a few nerfs through the year. As a result, Lich Bane was left feeling pretty underwhelming as its core users who were partially restoring it to a healthier state. Blasting Wand, Aether Wisp Sheen, 600 gold, Fiendish Codex, Aether Wisp Sheen. Okay, so the build path is definitely a lot nicer. This is going to clog your inventory less, mostly because of Fiendish Codex. And also, obviously, yes, the 550 gold just feels nicer as well. Ability haste, it's getting 15. That's very nice as well. Spellblade damage, 150% base AD plus 40% to 75% base AD plus 50% AP. But the Spellblade cooldown is coming up more frequently, which means that you're getting more rotations out of this. And yes, most of the people that are building this, the 10% AP is, I believe, going to probably, well, maybe not always, but the extra rotations of the ability plus the extra ability haste is definitely going to convert to more trade potential. So out the gate, I think Lich Bane, as soon as you complete the item, depending on what champion you are, it might feel a little bit worse inside of lane because of the missing base AD, because you're not going to be casting it immediately on 1.5 second cooldowns. In those instances, you'll probably be using it as a burst. And so I think right out the gate, it could feel a little bit worse, but then the item is definitely going to scale a lot better in mid and late game team fights, so that's nice. Rylais Crystal Scepter. Rylais has been struggling to find its place in the last couple of seasons because it's been trying to serve tanky battle mages, burn mages, and AP supports alike all at once. We're focused on its purpose as a utility item by lowering its cost and increasing its health to make it more accessible to tankier mid-range mages and supports. Total cost is down by 400. Combined cost 815 to 415. Ability power is only down by 15. Health is up by 50. This is a huge buff for champions like Malzahar, like Brand, things of that nature. 400 gold sooner is a really big deal. This is several minutes sooner now that they can actually complete their second core item in a lot of instances, because they'll be going Leandri into Rylais in most cases to get access to that utility, because the utility itself converts to more damage. So just being able to get it and suffocate is going to feel really nice, and it's going to help them curve that much faster. The other thing about this is that the 400 gold is now basically allocated towards the third item. So there's going to be some ebb and flows in terms of their power, but ultimately this won't end up hurting them until like fourth item or something like that, where yes, the loss of 15 AP is, maybe something that they would like to get back. But at the end of the day, not the end of the world. Massive buff to Rylais. Jungle, Chemtech Drake. Zombie health, 80% base health, 50% bonus health, to 70% base health, 40% bonus health. Zombie duration, 4 seconds to 3 seconds. This is totally fine. It doesn't really matter. Although this is the dragon that does feel kind of weird in that you can sort of lose the fight, but then you have a chance to salvage it, whereas obviously other dragons like Mountain and Infernal just outright generally are going to help you win the fight outright without you having a possibility of dying. I also liked one of the facts that Freak brought up recently in one of the LCS matches about Chemtech Souls generally for teams that are Chemtech Dragons for teams that are winning are generally less valuable than other dragons because of the nature of what the dragon is supplying you with and what is likely to happen for the team that is winning. Offensive action camouflage timer has been also increased by 1 second. Bonus damage versus enemies for more current health up to 10%, up to 12%. Okay. Hextech Drake. Hextech Dragon Soul is also overperformed and converted to other soul effects, though not to the same degree as Chemtech. Chain Lightning true damage 25 to 75 to 25 to 50 based on attacker's level. This is totally fine. I think it's a balanced one as well. Lethal Tempo, attack speed per stack, melee 13 to 10 to 15. Levels 1 to 15. So it is going to be down early, which will impact some of the champions that are utilizing it very well right now. And then for range, this is just getting completely crippled. I mean, even though it's up later, I would say that it's still crippling overall to be losing so many stacks early on. Although range does come online a little bit sooner, so I guess for like someone like Kale, who really is looking for this at like level 11 or something, that is going to be very, very beneficial for her. You're still going to pick Lethal Tempo if you're a Lethal Tempo champion. And now All Random Earth is back. Visual effects updates, visual effect updates. Obviously, I don't have these in front of me. And then there's a lot of upcoming skins, which I also do not have in front of me. So I am so sorry about that. But the way that the current lists and notes are given to me, I don't get access to the image files. So I'm not totally sure what to do on that front. Recapping, this is a patch with a lot of changes. I would say that the most sizable ones is probably the Rylais Crystal Scepter for the champions that are going to use it. I think Tristana is a very large change. I think the Senna thing is very big. I think Janna is really big because I think in the correct spots where she's getting picked, it's going to be very beneficial. But again, there's no real competitive changes that we've been seeing from like Damasha Cup or that we've been seeing from, the opening weeks of LCK, LCS, LEC. LPL, etc. And so we'll have to wait until 12.3 where those things are going to start seeing the effects on the patches. I do like that this patch did have a lot more changes than some of the more recent ones, but again, it still leaves me feeling a little bit empty, although I am excited about Janna because I do feel like Janna is a sizable enough change to, somewhat get excited about, but not really because she's an Enchantress support that is still she's been funneled into a hyper-conditional way of being picked, and so again, it still feels a little bit lackluster. I wish that they could have done a little bit more, especially because they tagged a lot of champions as well, like Talon and Zed ended up getting hit, so that is going to do it for these patch notes. Fortunately, this does mean that, there is some stuff inside of the solo queue meta that is affected by this, right? Talon's placement inside of solo queue is going to change, and obviously Zed as well is going to change. Outside of that, there's not so much. Janna probably is going to be good, but she's conditional, so she's not a proactive solo queue pick that you're actively looking to get, right? Nocturne, his change is nice, not enough to pole vault him by any means. Lulu's not moving. If you look at a lot of the solo queue meta right now, and I've been talking about this a lot for my patron solo queue tier lists, because it's felt very bad now for the last 4 or 5 patches, where basically the solo queue meta remains very, very, very static, and it's not really changing a lot. When you look at the champions in this patch that are getting buffed, or the champions that are getting nerfed, outside of the ones that I already mentioned, there's not a whole lot that's actually going on. Tristana's ability to get 1 extra auto attack and have a little bit more sustain inside of mid lane, that's really only going to be something that's utilized in pro play reliably. Can this convert to a solo kill 1 in 100 games or something in a solo queue environment? Absolutely it could. Veigar, is this change going to mean that you should start picking Veigar in solo queue? Absolutely not. Volibear's change, are you going to start picking Volibear in solo queue? Absolutely not. Yone and Yasuo change, is it going to change anything given what happened with lethal tempo and stuff? Absolutely not. Zed, is it going to mean that he's going to be harder in solo queue? Yes. So is Zed and Talon? Absolutely. Malzahar is Malzahar brand, the Rylais champions that got a huge buff from Rylais. That's going to be helpful. Senna, I already mentioned, she's a combo-centric champion. So it doesn't matter that Senna's change is also really big for her. She's a combo-centric champion. So for solo queue meta, this isn't really doing anything. Samira is, you can play her inside of solo queue. You could argue that Samira's change is sizable, but it's not sizable enough to where you weren't picking her, now you are picking her. And that's the whole problem with a lot of these changes. That, yes, they are buffs. They are not buff-worthy enough, or, well, in some cases, outside of the ones that I've mentioned, nerf-worthy enough, to where their placement is going to be altered. And that's the big problem, at least for the people that are already playing them or looking to play them in terms of where they're going to land. I have no doubt that win rates might move up or down a little bit, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't move the needle enough in terms of the champion's merit, and that's what I'm getting at. Hopefully Zeri has something of value to add, though. And that's it, and I will see you for hopefully a real patch on 12.3.